hi. How are you today? I hope all is well. Okay, so we've got a lot of reading to do. So I'm going to just get started. Genesis chapter 8. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. Also the fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were closed. And the rain from the sky was restrained, and the water receded steadily from the earth. And at the end of 150 days the water decreased. In the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. The water decreased steadily until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. Then it came about at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. And he sent out a raven, and it flew here and there until the water was dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove from him to see if the water was abated from the face of the land. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of his feet. So she returned to him into the ark. I said his, I meant her. For the water was on the surface of all the earth. Then he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark to himself. So he waited yet another 7 days, and again he sent out the dove from the ark. The dove came to him toward evening, and behold, in her beak was a freshly picked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the water was abated from the earth. And then he waited yet another 7 days, and sent out the dove. But she did not return to him again. Now it came about in the 601st year, in the first month, on the first of the month, the water was dried up from the earth. Then Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the surface of the ground was dried up. In the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. Then God spoke to Noah, saying, Go out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and animals, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may breed abundantly on the earth, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife, and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out, but by their families from the ark. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. The Lord smelled the soothing aroma, and the Lord said to himself, I will never again curse the ground on account of man, for the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth, and I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and the summer and winter, and dry and day and night shall not cease. Blah, blah, blah. I had a couple of those today. Okay. Now, you're going to notice that one of my books won't be utilized ever again. The one that I criticize the most. Needless to say, one of my dogs decided that it was dinner. So that book no longer exists in my house. I guess my dog thought the same thing, that it wasn't as good. So, today we're going to read from this and this, along with the John MacArthur commentary that I have on my laptop. Genesis 8:1 marks the turning point of the story. But God remembered Noah. This phrase does not suggest that God forgot about Noah and his family and suddenly remembered them. The affirmation of this phrase is that even in the midst of the violence of the surging water, God never forgot or lost sight of Noah. As God unleashed his judgment on the sin of humanity, his eyes were continually on one righteous man who would become the recipient of a renewed covenant. Here again, the writer carefully slowed the pace of the narrative and methodically described the reversal of the flood. The springs of the deep were once again sealed. Water began to retreat. The ark came to rest, and the mountain peaks slowly began to appear. The writer created a measure of tension in the mind of the reader. The flood had accomplished the purpose of wiping out life on earth. God has remembered righteous Noah. However, Noah and his family remained confined to the ark. They continued to wait, trusting God would eventually allow them to walk on dry ground, while Noah's righteousness was the basis of his salvation. It did not remove him from submission to God's timing. Verse 2 through 12 heightened the original reader's experience of this delay by describing the release of birds and the wait for their return. Although many have pointed to the significance of the types of birds Noah used, we should again not allow a focus on the details to overshadow the core message. God remained in control and moved the story toward renewal according to his timing. Okay, the beginning of renewal, chapter 8, verses 13 through 16 and 20 and 22. Approximately a year after the rains began, Noah saw dry ground. One can only imagine the sense of relief Noah and his family felt at this sight. Just as God decreated earth through the flood, returning it to its original condition as a formless and void ocean, God recreated it as dry land once again, appeared from the midst of the waters, however, here again. The writer slowed the pace of the story, and the family waited for the land to dry. 3 times in verses 13 through 14, the writer mentioned the drying of the ground and stated the process took almost 2 months. Finally, God told Noah to bring the animals and his family out of the ark. Although eager to get off the ark, God command to disembark may have felt similar to the way Abraham would later feel when God called him to leave his father's home. Noah and his family had longed to feel dry ground under their feet, but the ground they stepped onto was far from the home they had known, and it was void of other humans. God certainly understood the thoughts and the feelings this strange new world inspired. God told Noah to be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Chapter 8, verse 17. These are the same words God spoke to Adam and Eve in the garden, chapter 1, verse 28. God was assuring Noah and his family that he would use them once again to populate the earth. Noah responded to God's salvation and protection in the only way he knew how. He offered a sacrifice to God. God took notice of the aroma of the sacrifice and was pleased. God completed the renewal of the earth by promising never again to wipe all of life from it. The biblical writer again drew a sharp contrast between his God and the gods of the Babylonians. While false gods often acted conspiracially out of momentary emotions, the writer demonstrated Israel's God was always in control, and judgment would never be the final word. He was always looking for the opportunity to draw humanity into renewed life. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Go on to this one. Okay. Now, according to this book, this is what it says. Genesis 8, verses 1 through 22. In Hebrew, Genesis 8:1 begins with the word but, or then. These words, but God, in the Bible often communicate that no matter how dismal or difficult circumstances may be, God makes all the difference. Here, but God contrasts the devastating and cataclysmic judgment of God on the earth and sinners with the grace of God to save Noah and his family and to restore all of creation, communicated with the words, but God remembered Noah. This statement, God remembered Noah, does not mean God had forgotten about Noah. So they have similarities in belief. Nor does it mean God merely called Noah to mind. When God remembers, it means he is faithful to keep his promises. For instance, when the psalmist declared that God hath remembered his covenant forever in Psalms 105:8, the meaning is that God faithfully keeps his covenant forever. God's remembering is often closely related to his miraculous saving acts on behalf of those to whom he had made prior covenant commitments. God saved Lot when he remembered Abraham, Genesis 19 through verse 29. God remembered Rachel and enabled Rachel to conceive and give birth to Joseph, chapter 30, verses 22 and 23. God sent Moses to save Israel from Egypt when he remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Exodus 2:24 and 6:5. And God remembered his people Israel as they headed to the promised land, Numbers 10 verse 9. Moreover, it was God's remembering his covenant that led him to be faithful to Israel when Israel had become unfaithful to him, Leviticus 26:42 and 45. God took the initiative with Noah when he promised to make a covenant with Noah. Therefore, the statement, but God remembered Noah, means that God was keeping his promise to Noah, but saving Noah and his family from the flood, by saving Noah and his family from the flood. Bleh. Moses originally wrote this when the children of Israel had just been delivered from Egyptian bondage. Israel needed to remember the one who had saved them and learned from Noah's example what it meant to live in covenant relationship with the Lord. I agree with 90% of that. There is one little thing. The word but was not in the Hebrew language until they renewed the Hebrew language. We have the language of Farsi because the Israelite people had basically walked away from the Hebrew language, and in turn, right, they picked up other languages of their captors or people that they were, living close to, and it wasn't until one particular Israelite later on brought it back into existence. But words like but and so on, and even then, were not a part of the Hebrew language. So it would have actually read something along the lines of God, blah, 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 blah. It would not have said but God. It would have just said, where is that actual verse? Hold on. Okay, it would have said God remembered Noah. It would not have said but God remembered Noah. Okay, that is a part of our language. Right then and there. Okay, so other than that, I mean, it's pretty much accurate. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and pull up the verses or the commentary from MacArthur. It might take me a minute. Okay. It's loading. Okay, and no. Okay. God remembered Noah. This does not mean that God forgot Noah. Okay, so they're all like-minded in that aspect. What? That his wrath against the wickedness of mankind was now appeased. He remembered his divine mercy toward mankind, as his divine judgment had now been fulfilled, and turned his attention to getting Noah situated in the post-flood earth. God made a wind to pass over the earth. Here we see some repetition of God's original creation of earth. His spirit hovered over the earth. His spirit hovered over the waters during creation, and now he sends a wind to pass over the waters. The word for wind is the same as for spirit, the mountains of Ararat. The mountains of Ararat, these are in the region of the... I don't even know how to say this. Caucasus, the tallest peak in modern-day Turkey. Sorry. It's, if you know how to say it, it's spelled Caucasus. Okay. Okay. Raven. The raven is a carrion eater, a bird of death. It undoubtedly found much rancid flesh to feed on, but there was no dry ground suitable for it to roost. It kept going to and fro, that is, out of the ark window and back again. He also sent out from himself a dove. A dove is much more selective in its food choices than a raven. The dove's choice of food would indicate that new life had begun to grow and that Noah and his freshly plucked olive leaf. This indicates that the waters had subsided to the point that trees were dry and putting forth fresh leaves. Appropriately, the dove and the olive branch have endured throughout history as symbols of peace. Noah removed the covering of the ark. This was probably a window or hatch of some sort. Noah did not leave the ark until God commanded him to do so. Noah not only obeyed God, but also worshipped him. These characteristics set him apart from his generation and reveal the secret to his strong relationship with God. Noah built an altar to the Lord. Noah and his family had been cooped up inside the ark for 378 days. They had not felt sunshine, touched dry land, or lived any kind of normal existence during that time. But the first thing Noah did after leaving the ark was build an altar to worship God. Most people would rush about building shelter for themselves, gathering food, and so forth, and perhaps even plan a party. But Noah was a man who walked with God, and his first thought was to worship. The Lord smelled a soothing aroma. God's justice had been sanctified, and his altar was abated. Once again, Noah gives us a picture of Christ, whose perfect sacrifice for sin would later be the final offering, the sacrifice that made complete atonement for the sins of man and opened the way to removing the curse. Okay. First and foremost, sorry about the little glitches there. Still trying to learn how to keep things flowing fast. However, okay, let's talk. What do we see here? We see that God kept Noah safe. Noah and his family. He kept his promise, which is one thing that we notice throughout all of the Bible. God always keeps his promise. He makes several covenants with a few different people. And in those covenants, he keeps his promise. Now, a lot of you will go, okay, well, there are some covenants that no longer are meaningful. Okay? Like the covenant with Abraham. Here's the trick, though. While the second covenant is essential, the one in the New Testament, the first covenant with Abraham, still is significant. But it's not significant for you and me, because we're not Israelites. Right? God made a covenant with Abraham to make his children great, as numerous as the stars, right? Or the sands on the beach, whatever you want to go with. That was it. That was the covenant with Abraham, that he was going to make him great amongst his people, right? But not only does Abraham create one group of people, but two. Right? We have the Israelites and we have the Muslims. Okay, so do we say that the first covenant is not essential? For us, maybe not. But for the Israelites, I would say that covenant is still in effect. Because the Israelites could be wiped out, but they're not. As a matter of fact, I was listening to a thing, about the population of the Israelite people, and there are roughly around 700,000, give or take a war or two, since 2012. But my point being, there are so many Israelites that they can't even live in Jerusalem. Right? There's too many. So they live throughout the world. Right? Which is fine. And we also know that the first covenant is essential because in Revelations we hear what? That there are going to be 144,000 Israelites in heaven who believed in Jesus, who go to the safest place that they can go to survive during the 7-year reign. Right? So I still believe in the first covenant. Now, do I believe that it's essential for me? No. No, God did not promise me many, many children. I have one. So, there we go. Right? And if he had promised it to my dad, that means me, my sister, her 2 kids, and mine. That's kind of saying, well, you will have a family, but you may not have a large one. Not like Abraham. Right? Okay. Now, I agree with them on the remembrance part. Okay, but like I said, the idea of the word but or then or even the word and was not an essential word when the Bible was written. It was not even, a written word. It may have been something that they could have said, like had something that kind of meant that, but they didn't write it. It says, God remembered. We add in that stuff, right? Because it makes the sentence structure sound more us, right? If you went to a literal translation, most of the literal translations will not have that stuff in it. Unless it was translated in a new format, right? To help us to understand what the Bible was saying. So, then, the next thing. The birds, okay? Why did Noah send out birds instead of just waiting for God to say, okay, step on out? It's kind of a curiosity thing, right? Checking to see where things are without leaving the ark. Now, could he have opened up that door or whatever that he crawled out of to get out of the ark? Just to see what was going on? He could have. But he didn't. Why? Because God didn't tell him to get out. And he was faithful and loyal to God. And he was going to wait for God's word. But in the same instance, he's also gone, I kind of want to see. What will happen if this bird comes out? Will they, fly away and never come back? Will they find something? That was kind of Noah's way of asking God for a little, peace of mind. At least that's in my opinion. Well, today's lesson actually went a lot shorter than I thought. So, here's my suggestion. Or at least my challenge. Whatever is going on in your life, take it to God. Remember that God has you. No matter what the situation, good, bad, or indifferent. There's going to be bad times. Do you pray just because you have good times? No. You tend to forget the good times. Right? And you only pray, a lot of us only pray during the bad. Because we're worried, we're panicking, we're freaking out. But what does God say about that? He says, don't. Trust in Him. Right? Can we ask for reassurances? Yes. But don't panic. Don't fret. Hey, I'm still alive, and I passed out on my bathroom floor. And I'm going to the doctor here on the 19th just to have a checkup to make sure that everything is healing the way it's supposed to. So, I'm thankful that God allowed me more time because He needs something from me. I'm thankful for that. Pray. I had an old t-shirt. I could never fit into it again. But I had an old t-shirt that said pray hard. And it had a picture of a person, just their legs, with a hole where the knees are on the jeans. Sorry, I forgot to add the word jeans to the picture there. Anyways. How often do you pray? Is it just first thing in the morning, move on with life? Because God says pray without ceasing. Is it just at night? Is it only when you're going through some bad stuff? Or between meals? Pray without ceasing. Doesn't mean be on your knees constantly. It means keep talking. Keep communicating with God. Tell him how you're feeling. You know? That's what it means. Now, I hope that all of you have a blessed day. I hope that each moment when you see the opportunity, you go out and you talk to somebody about God. When you have the opportunity, pray. Don't just wait for something to happen. Just pray. Just talk. Read your Bible. I'm doing this for those who want to spend some time in the Word, or who don't know what actually is written in the Bible. That's why I'm doing this. I hope that you all have a blessed day. See you next time.